On March 20th, 2004, at 908 South Gulfport Street in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Vernon Carl Hewlett and Linda Marie Heinzelman were murdered inside the home they shared. Vernon, 34, was a reliable sanitation worker for the city of Hattiesburg who maintained close ties with his large extended family. Linda, 37, was his devoted girlfriend who kept their house. They had opened their doors to Vernon's cousin, Roger Gillette, and Roger's girlfriend, Lisa Jo Chamberlain, allowing the couple to stay for several weeks while they got back on their feet. When Vernon finally asked them to find their own place, that reasonable request triggered an explosion of violence that would end 2 innocent lives. Vernon was beaten in the head with a hammer, blows so forceful they fractured his skull and killed him. His body was later decapitated and dismembered. Linda endured hours of torture. She was raped with a beer bottle, beaten repeatedly, stabbed multiple times, and finally suffocated with plastic bags wrapped over her head. The pathologist would document 69 separate injuries on her body. After the murders, both victims were cut into pieces, stuffed into their own freezer, loaded onto Linda's stolen pickup truck, and driven 900 miles to an abandoned farm in Kansas, where the freezer was plugged in and sealed with duct tape. 9 days later, when Kansas authorities raided the property looking for drugs, they discovered the dismembered remains. Roger Gillette, who wielded the hammer and the knife, who inflicted every fatal wound, who personally killed both victims, was initially sentenced to death, but would later be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Lisa Jo Chamberlain, who was present during the murders and helped dispose of the bodies, still remains on Mississippi's death row awaiting execution, the only woman facing death in the state. If her execution proceeds, she will be the first woman put to death in Mississippi since May 19, 1944, 81 years ago. This is the story of Lisa Jo Chamberlain, Roger Lee Gillette, Vernon Hewlett, Linda Heinzelman, and the 21-year journey from a brutal double murder to a death row cell that forces us to examine what justice means when guilt is shared but punishment is not equal. If you're drawn to stories of justice, betrayal, and the people who reach a point of no return, make sure to subscribe to No Way Out. This is where true crime meets truth. Real cases, real consequences, the darkest corners of human decision, broken down into tiny pieces so you can see every detail and make your own conclusions better. Lisa Jo Chamberlain entered the world on September 30th, 1972, in Oregon. Her arrival should have marked the beginning of a protected childhood. Instead, it became the start of decades of trauma that would shape every decision she made. Her biological father began abusing Lisa when she was still a toddler. The violence was not occasional, it was constant. He directed his rage at both Lisa and her mother, creating a home where fear became normal. By the time Lisa turned 3 or 4 years old, her parents divorced. The separation should have brought relief. It did not. Lisa's mother struggled with bipolar disorder. She turned to alcohol to manage her condition, and the drinking became severe. The woman who should have protected Lisa became another source of pain. Her mother's abuse replaced her father's abuse. Lisa had nowhere safe to go. When Lisa's mother remarried, the child hoped for stability. Her stepfather brought more of the same treatment. He abused both Lisa and her stepsister. The pattern continued without intervention. No teacher reported the signs. No neighbor called for help. No relative stepped in to remove Lisa from the cycle. The abuse extended beyond her immediate family. Lisa's half-brother sexually assaulted her repeatedly throughout her childhood. These were not isolated incidents. They happened multiple times over several years. Lisa learned that family members could not be trusted. She learned that her body was not her own. She learned that speaking up changed nothing. When Lisa was in 4th grade, she experienced another violation. A teacher at her school raped her. This person held authority. This person was supposed to educate and protect students. Instead, he added to Lisa's trauma. The school system failed to protect her. The violation went unpunished. By age 12, Lisa started drinking alcohol. At 13, she began using methamphetamine. These substances offered temporary escape from memories she could not process. The drugs numbed pain that had no other outlet. Lisa's childhood was being stolen year by year, and she had no tools to fight back. Despite the chaos at home, Lisa did well in certain environments. When she worked at a nursing home as an adult, coworkers described her as caring and attentive. When she served as a private caregiver, clients appreciated her kindness. The woman who emerged during sober periods showed genuine compassion. She attended to people with love and care. Others found her easy to like. Lisa had a natural ability to connect with elderly patients and people who needed help. At the nursing home, she took time to listen to residents' stories. She remembered details about their lives. She treated them with dignity rather than viewing them as tasks to complete. Supervisors noticed that patients responded positively to Lisa. They asked for her specifically. They smiled when she entered their rooms. This capacity for empathy revealed something important about Lisa. The abuse she suffered had not destroyed her ability to feel compassion for others. When she was sober and not trapped in a violent relationship, Lisa could function as a caring person. She could hold employment. She could maintain appropriate boundaries. She could be trusted with vulnerable people. Lisa married for the first time in her early 20s. Records do not provide extensive details about this first husband, but the marriage produced Lisa's first child, a son. Lisa tried to be a good mother despite having no example of good mothering in her own childhood. She loved her baby. She wanted to provide for him. She hoped this relationship would give her the family stability she craved. The first marriage did not last. Lisa needed help raising her child. She needed financial support. She was not equipped to manage everything alone. Lisa married a second time. This husband fathered her second child, another son. But this marriage brought more pain instead of the healing Lisa desperately needed. Her second husband abused her physically. He continued the pattern of violence that Lisa's father, stepfather, and half-brother had established. He hurt the woman who had already been hurt so many times before. Lisa stayed with her second husband despite the abuse. This decision seems irrational to people who have never experienced long-term trauma. During the second marriage, Lisa tried to maintain stability for her two sons. She wanted to give them a better childhood than she had experienced. When she was sober, she succeeded in showing her children love and attention. She read to them. She played with them. She tried to protect them from seeing the worst of her husband's violence toward her. But Lisa's drug use accelerated during her second marriage. Methamphetamine offered escape from physical and emotional pain. The drug numbed the memories she could not process. It provided temporary relief from the shame she felt about staying in an abusive relationship. It helped her function through days when getting out of bed seemed impossible. The second marriage eventually ended. Lisa was now a mother of two sons, still battling addiction, still carrying decades of unresolved trauma. She had no effective coping mechanisms beyond substance abuse. Lisa married a third time. This relationship produced her third child, a daughter. Lisa now had two sons and a daughter, 3 children she loved deeply but struggled to care for properly. Her addiction interfered with her parenting. Her unresolved trauma made it difficult to provide the stability children need. Her pattern of choosing abusive partners meant her children witnessed violence even when it was not directed at them. Despite these failures, Lisa was described by people who knew her as a devoted mother during her periods of sobriety. In Oregon, Lisa met a man named Roger Lee Gillette. He was involved with methamphetamine manufacturing. He had his own history of violence and poor decisions. He represented everything Lisa should have avoided. But damaged people often find each other. They recognize in each other the same wounds and dysfunctions they carry. Roger's story, like Lisa's, began long before their paths crossed in Oregon. Roger Lee Gillette was born on June 9, 1974, in a small Kansas community. His family had deep roots in Russell County, where relatives owned property, including a farm in the rural countryside. Roger grew up with extended family nearby, including aunts and cousins who lived in the same county. Among Roger's family was his cousin, Vernon Hewlett. The two boys grew up together, sharing childhood experiences and family gatherings. Vernon was just 5 years older than Roger, and their families maintained close contact throughout the boys' early years. The bond between the cousins would make later events even more difficult to understand. Roger's family included his Aunt Debbie Lynn Milam and his Aunt Patty Hewlett, both residents of Russell. Patty lived at 606 North Ash Street in the town of Russell. Family members owned an abandoned farm at 5482 190th Street in the rural areas outside town. The property would become significant years later. Details about Roger's childhood remain limited in court records. What is known is that he developed connections throughout Russell County. He knew the layout of the area. He understood which properties stood empty and which family members might offer shelter when needed. By his late 20s, Roger had accumulated experience with methamphetamine. He knew how to manufacture the drug. He understood the market for it. He also understood the risks involved in making and selling illegal substances in a small community where everyone knew everyone else. When Roger met Lisa Jo Chamberlain in Oregon, both were using drugs regularly. Lisa's childhood trauma had led her down a path of substance abuse. Roger's involvement with methamphetamine had become serious. They began living together in Oregon, but the arrangement did not last long. Roger decided to move back to Kansas, and Lisa went with him. In Russell County, they moved in with some of Roger's relatives. The living situation provided temporary stability, but it was not permanent. Both continued using and manufacturing methamphetamine. The drug use accelerated, their need for money increased, their decision-making deteriorated. Roger's relationship with Lisa included violence. On at least one occasion, he tried to drown her. This was not a moment of passion that got out of hand. It was attempted murder. Lisa's response revealed how damaged she was by her past. Instead of leaving Roger, she tried to make him feel better about attacking her. Roger could be charming when he wanted something. He could present himself as reasonable and calm. But beneath that surface lay someone capable of extreme violence. Family members would later recall moments when Roger's anger flashed unexpectedly. He held grudges. He did not forgive easily. In early 2004, Roger and Lisa faced drug charges in Kansas. Authorities were building a case against them for methamphetamine manufacturing. The couple knew they were under investigation. They needed to leave Russell County before arrests were made. They needed money. They needed a place to hide. Roger thought of his cousin Vernon. The two had been closest children, growing up together at family gatherings and holiday celebrations. Vernon had always been kind to Roger, treating his younger cousin with patience and affection. Roger knew that Vernon had built a stable life for himself in Mississippi. He knew Vernon had a house in Hattiesburg. Vernon was the type of person who would help family in need. Roger had not maintained close contact with Vernon over the years. Distance and different life paths had separated the cousins. But Roger understood that family loyalty ran deep in their shared heritage. He calculated that Vernon would feel obligated to provide temporary shelter to relatives who had fallen on hard times. It was a bet that would cost Vernon everything. Vernon Carl Hewlett was born on November 18, 1969, in Mississippi. By his mid-30s, Vernon had built a stable life in Hattiesburg. He worked as a sanitation worker for the city of Hattiesburg, a job that provided steady income and benefits. His co-workers knew him as reliable. He showed up for his shifts. He did his work without complaint. Vernon lived at 908 South Gulfport Street in Hattiesburg. The home was modest but comfortable. It had enough space for Vernon and his girlfriend. The neighborhood was established with working-class families who had lived there for generations. People knew their neighbors. They watched out for each other's properties. Vernon's biological family remained close despite the complicated relationships created by his parents' separation. His mother Caroline had remarried Thomas Hester, and the blended family maintained connections. Vernon spoke regularly with his mother. He visited his siblings. He remained part of the family network. In his personal life, Vernon had found stability with Linda Heinzelman. The couple had been together for several years. They shared the house on South Gulfport Street. They shared expenses. They had built a life together based on mutual support and affection. Friends described them as a devoted couple. Vernon owned a white Dodge Dakota pickup truck with Mississippi plates. He used it to get to work and run errands. The truck was reliable transportation in a city where most people drove. It represented the modest but secure life Vernon had built for himself through steady work. The house at 908 South Gulfport Street contained Vernon and Linda's accumulated possessions. They had furniture, including a couch. They had a freezer for storing food. They had personal items collected over years together. The home held photographs of family members and mementos from trips they had taken. The decision to let Roger and Lisa stay at the house on South Gulfport Street seemed temporary, a few weeks at most. Vernon and Linda had space. They could help relatives who had hit hard times. The gesture would have been unremarkable, except for what came next. Roger and Lisa arrived in Hattiesburg driving a blue Mitsubishi Eclipse. They brought a few possessions with them. They said they were looking for work and needed a few weeks to get established before finding their own place. Linda tried to be a good host. She made space in the house for the visitors. She adjusted her routines to accommodate 2 additional people in the home. The first few days passed without major problems, but tensions began to build almost immediately. On March 6, 2004, everything shifted. Linda was driving her pickup truck with Vernon as a passenger. Roger and Lisa followed in their Mitsubishi Eclipse. They were heading to the Mississippi Gulf Coast together, a trip that should have been pleasant. According to Lisa's later statements, Linda changed lanes abruptly on Highway 49. The Mitsubishi could not brake in time. It crashed into the rear of Linda's truck. The Eclipse suffered severe damage. Linda's truck had only minor dents. The accident appeared to be a simple traffic incident caused by following too closely. Linda promised to file an insurance claim for the damage to the Eclipse. She said she would report the accident and share the insurance payout with Roger and Lisa so they could repair their car. Roger and Lisa agreed to wait for the insurance money. But Linda never filed the claim. The reasons for Linda's decision remain unclear. Perhaps she worried the claim would raise her insurance rates. Perhaps she had let her coverage lapse and did not want to admit it. Perhaps she simply forgot amid the stress of having house guests who showed no signs of leaving. Whatever her reasoning, Linda's failure to follow through on her promise became a source of escalating tension. Roger's anger over the unfiled insurance claim grew more intense each day. He did not simply complain about the situation, he obsessed over it. He interpreted Linda's inaction as a deliberate betrayal. He told Vernon's mother that he wanted to push Linda through a plate glass window. The violent imagery revealed something dangerous in Roger's thinking. This was not normal frustration. This was rage building toward action. Linda remained unaware of how much danger she was in. She continued her daily routines, unaware that Roger was fantasizing about violence against her. She had no way of knowing that her failure to file the insurance claim had transformed her houseguest into a threat. The damaged Mitsubishi Eclipse sat unusable outside the house on South Gulfport Street, a constant reminder of the accident and the broken promise. Roger stared at the crumpled front end every time he stepped outside. The sight fed his anger. Roger and Lisa had no transportation of their own. They had no money to repair the car. They had no way to leave Hattiesburg. Their temporary stay became indefinite, stretching from days into weeks, with no end in sight. Lisa watched Roger's mood deteriorate. She knew what he was capable of when angry. She had experienced his violence directed at her. She understood that Roger's rage was not just words, but Lisa was trapped by her own circumstances. She had no money, no car, no family nearby to help her leave. Vernon noticed the tension in his home. Roger's attitude had changed after the car accident. The cousin who had arrived needing help now seemed hostile. Roger made cutting remarks. He complained about small things. The atmosphere in the house became uncomfortable. Linda tried to maintain normalcy. She went to work. She came home and made dinner. She attempted to be patient with the situation, but having 2 house guests with no departure date wore on her. The house felt crowded. Her routines were disrupted. She wanted her home back. In mid-March, Vernon and Linda decided they had done enough. Several weeks had passed since Roger and Lisa arrived. The couple showed no signs of finding work or saving money to leave. The car accident had complicated everything, but that was not Vernon and Linda's responsibility to fix permanently. Vernon told Roger that he and Lisa needed to move out. Roger did not respond reasonably. He saw the request to leave as another betrayal. First, Linda had refused to file the insurance claim. Now Vernon was kicking him out. In Roger's mind, his family had turned against him. He was being thrown out with no car and no money. He felt humiliated. Roger began planning. He did not share these plans with Lisa in explicit detail, but she understood the direction of his thinking. Roger talked about the safe in Vernon and Linda's bedroom. He talked about how much money might be inside. He talked about taking what he was owed. Lisa said nothing to stop him. This was a decision she would have to live with forever. She did not warn Vernon and Linda. She did not suggest they leave before Roger acted. She did not call police or tell anyone what Roger was considering. She remained silent as Roger's plans solidified from vague anger into concrete intentions. Her silence made her complicit before any violence began. March 19, 2004 started like any other day for Vernon Hewlett and Linda Heinzelman. They went about their normal routines that morning, unaware that the people sleeping under their roof were planning to kill them. Vernon worked his shift for the city sanitation department. He drove his route, collected garbage, and interacted with coworkers. It was an ordinary workday. Linda handled her responsibilities as she has always done. That evening, Vernon and Linda came home to 908 South Gulfport Street. They entered the house they shared with Roger and Lisa. The hours passed. Night fell. The household settled into what should have been routine. But Roger was waiting for his moment. He had decided what would happen. He had chosen violence over leaving peacefully. He had determined that Vernon and Linda would not live to see March 20 worse. What happened inside 908 South Gulfport Street over the next 24 hours would shock even experienced investigators. The attack began with Vernon. Roger moved first against his cousin, the man who had given him shelter when he had nowhere else to go. The weapon was a hammer, taken from Vernon's own tools. Roger struck Vernon on the left side of his head with enough force to cause fatal blunt force trauma. The blow was delivered with intent to kill. Vernon lost consciousness immediately from the impact, but Roger did not stop with one strike. He continued hitting Vernon's head until the damage was catastrophic. The skull fractured. The brain sustained massive trauma. Roger hit Vernon again and again, even after Vernon was clearly incapacitated. Then Roger took a knife and slashed Vernon's throat. The multiple methods of violence suggested rage beyond the goal of simply killing. This was personal. This was revenge for perceived slights. Roger was not just eliminating someone who stood in his way. He was punishing Vernon for asking him to leave, for being related to Linda, who failed to file the insurance claim, for having a stable life that Roger lacked. Linda heard the attack on Vernon. She knew she was next. She tried to run, to hide, to escape somehow. Roger caught her. What happened to Linda over the following hours constitutes some of the most brutal violence in Mississippi crime records. Roger raped Linda with a beer bottle. This act served no purpose except to inflict pain and humiliation. Linda was beaten repeatedly with fists and possibly other objects. She was stabbed multiple times in her torso and neck. Wounds covered her body. Roger tried to strangle Linda. He tried to suffocate her with a pillow. When these methods did not work quickly enough, he wrapped plastic bags over her head. Linda's body fought to survive. She struggled for air. The process took time. At some point, Roger left Linda for dead and returned to find her still breathing. He had to finish what he started. More plastic bags, more suffocation. Finally, Linda Heinzelman died on the floor of her own home after hours of torture. Lisa and Roger had sex in front of Vernon's corpse while his head hung to one side. Lisa allegedly said it was the greatest sex they ever had and described it as an extreme adrenaline rush. Whether this statement was true or fabricated remains disputed. After both victims were dead, Roger demanded that Lisa help him open the safe in the bedroom. Roger believed money was inside. Linda had refused to file the insurance claim, so Roger felt entitled to take whatever cash the couple had saved. Lisa followed Roger's instructions. The safe would not open easily. Vernon was dead and could not provide the combination. Linda had died without revealing the code. Roger pried at the safe with tools until he broke it open. Whatever was inside became part of what Roger and Lisa took from the house. Roger then made a decision that showed calculation. He would not leave the bodies in Hattiesburg, where they would be quickly discovered. He had time. Vernon and Linda had no visitors expected. Neighbors would not notice anything wrong immediately. Roger could move the bodies far away. Roger Gillette made a practical decision based on logistics. 2 adult bodies would be difficult to transport whole. They would be heavy. They would take up significant space. They would be impossible to hide if anyone looked in the vehicle. Roger needed to make the bodies smaller. The dismemberment took place inside the house on South Gulfport Street. Roger decapitated Vernon. These acts required time and physical effort. They required cutting through bone and muscle. They required tools that would have been found in a typical home garage or kitchen. Linda's body was also cut into pieces. The dismemberment of both victims was methodical. Roger worked on this task while Lisa remained in the house. She knew what was happening. She heard it. She may have helped. Roger needed containers for the body parts. The large freezer that Vernon and Linda owned became the solution. It was big enough to hold both dismembered bodies. It could be sealed shut. It could be plugged in to prevent decomposition during transport. Roger and Lisa loaded the severed body into plastic bags. They placed these bags into the freezer. Vernon's larger pieces went in first. Then, Linda's remains were added on top. The freezer was filled with what remained of 2 people who had been alive 24 hours earlier. The house needed to be cleaned. Blood covered the floor in multiple rooms. Blood spattered the walls. Blood soaked into the couch where Vernon's body had been propped. Roger and Lisa worked to remove evidence of what had happened. They rolled up the carpeting from the floor. Blood had seeped into the fibers too deeply to clean. The carpet had to be removed entirely. They carried the rolled carpet outside and planned to dispose of it elsewhere. The floor beneath showed stains that could not be easily explained if anyone entered the house. Roger took Vernon's wallet and identification. He took Linda's purse, wallet, and identification. He gathered these items along with other evidence that connected them to the scene. Lisa collected blood-stained clothing. She gathered the bloody pillow that had been used to suffocate Linda. She found the duct tape that had been used during the attack. All of these items needed to disappear. They put everything into plastic trash bags. Roger backed Linda's white Dodge Dakota pickup truck to the house. He and Lisa loaded the freezer into the truck bed. Into the truck went the trash bags containing bloody evidence. Into the truck went items from Vernon and Linda's home that Roger considered valuable. Into the truck went anything that might help Roger and Lisa survive on the run. Roger found Linda's insurance papers and vehicle registration in the house. He now had documentation showing the truck belonged to Linda. As far as anyone checking license plates would know, Linda Heinzelman was driving her own vehicle. No one would stop them on the road. The loading took hours. By the time they finished, it was late on March 20th. Roger Gillette drove Linda Heinzelman's white Dodge Dakota pickup truck out of Hattiesburg before dawn on March 21, 2004. Lisa sat in the passenger seat. Behind them, in the truck bed, covered by a tarp, the freezer contained Vernon and Linda's dismembered remains. The route from Hattiesburg, Mississippi to Russell County, Kansas, covered approximately 900 miles. The drive would take at least 12 to 14 hours depending on speed and stops. Roger could not drive too fast and risk being pulled over by police. He could not drive too slow and attract attention. He needed to blend in with normal highway traffic. Roger stopped for gas when necessary. He stopped for food. He used cash so there would be no credit card trail. He acted calm and normal at every stop. Just another driver making the long trip across state lines. No one suspected that the truck contained evidence of 2 brutal murders. The freezer remained plugged into a power source at the house until they loaded it into the truck. Now unplugged, the bodies inside would begin to thaw and decompose. Roger needed to get the freezer to Kansas and plug back in before serious decomposition occurred. Time was important. As they crossed state lines from Mississippi into Arkansas, Roger and Lisa became federal fugitives. Transporting bodies across state lines falls under federal jurisdiction. Roger knew exactly where he was going. The abandoned farm at 5482 190th Street in rural Russell County belonged to his family. His father and grandfather owned the property. The farm had not been actively worked in years. Buildings on the property stood empty. No one lived there. No one visited regularly. The farm was remote. The nearest neighbors were not close enough to notice activity at the property unless they specifically watched for it. Roger could come and go without being observed. He could hide the truck. He could hide the freezer. He could hide evidence of the murders. Roger arrived in Russell County late on March 21st. He drove directly to the farm. The property included several outbuildings, a metal shed and a wooden granary. These structures would hold what Roger needed to hide. Roger backed the truck into the metal shed. This put the vehicle out of sight from the road. Anyone driving past the property would not see Linda's distinctive white Dodge Dakota. The truck would appear to be just another farm vehicle stored in an outbuilding. The freezer presented a different problem. It was too large to easily hide inside a vehicle. Roger needed a building with electrical power, so he could plug in the freezer and keep the bodies from decomposing further. The wooden granary had electricity. Roger and Lisa manhandled the heavy freezer out of the truck bed. They dragged or carried it into the wooden granary. Roger found an electrical outlet and plugged in the freezer. The unit began running, cooling the contents inside. Roger was not finished hiding evidence. He took rolls of duct tape and electrical tape from the house on South Gulfport Street. He wrapped the tape around the freezer multiple times, sealing it shut. The tape served two purposes. It would prevent anyone from casually opening the freezer to see what was inside, and it would contain any odors if decomposition began. The freezer now sat in the wooden granary, plugged in and sealed with tape. The white Dodge Dakota sat in the metal shed, out of view. Roger and Lisa had successfully transported two murder victims' bodies 900 miles from the crime scene to a remote farm in Kansas. But Roger still needed money. The cash and valuables taken from Vernon and Linda's house would not last long. Roger and Lisa had no legitimate employment. They had no savings. They had nowhere to live except the abandoned farm or with Roger's relatives who believed his cover story. Roger needed income quickly, and he knew only one way to generate it fast. Methamphetamine manufacturing requires chemicals, equipment, and knowledge of the cooking process. Roger had all three. He had made meth before in Russell County. He knew where to obtain the necessary chemicals. He knew how to set up a lab. He knew the market for his product. The abandoned farm at 5482 190th Street became Roger's meth lab. The property's isolation made it ideal for illegal drug production. No neighbors would smell the chemical odors associated with cooking meth. No one would notice the people coming and going to buy drugs. Roger could operate without immediate detection. Lisa had experience with methamphetamine from the user's perspective. She had been using meth since age 13. Lisa agreed to cook the methamphetamine in exchange for $500. They needed money desperately. Manufacturing meth offered the fastest way to generate cash. The cooking process produces toxic waste. Pseudoephedrine packages, lithium battery casings, chemical containers, tubing, filters, and other materials must be disposed of after each cook. This waste cannot simply be thrown in household garbage without raising suspicion. Roger and Lisa needed a disposal method that would not lead police to their operation. They chose the Russell City public swimming pool. After cooking batches of meth at the farm, Roger and Lisa loaded the waste materials into trash bags. They drove to the public pool and disposed of the bags in dumpsters there. This seemed like a safe method at the time. Public dumpsters held trash from many sources. Their waste would blend in with legitimate garbage. Roger also needed to explain possession of Linda's truck. His own vehicle, the blue Mitsubishi Eclipse, remained unusable in Hattiesburg, with front-end damage from the March 6 accident. Roger now drove Linda's white Dodge Dakota around Russell County. The truck had Mississippi plates registered to Linda Marie Heinzelman. Anyone who ran the plates would find the vehicle belonged to someone who was not Roger Gillette. Roger developed a cover story. He told people in Russell County that he had traveled to Mississippi and acquired the truck from relatives there. This explanation was close enough to the truth to sound believable. Roger did have relatives in Mississippi. He did just return from Mississippi. The truck did come from that trip. People who heard this story had no reason to question it. Lisa stayed mostly out of sight during this period. She was unknown in Russell County. She had no connections to the community. She existed in Roger's world, dependent on him for shelter and money. She continued using methamphetamine, which kept her compliant and less likely to question Roger's decisions. Roger reconnected with family members in Russell County. He stayed at his Aunt Patty Hewlett's house at 606 North Ash Street in Russell. Patty believed Roger's story about the truck. She believed he was trying to get back on his feet after trouble in Oregon. She did not know about Vernon and Linda. She did not know about the bodies in the freezer at the farm. Roger also made contact with friends in the area. He sold methamphetamine to generate cash. He talked about his plans. He mentioned the truck. He acted like someone who was rebuilding his life, rather than someone who had just committed double murder. On at least 2 occasions, Roger told friends in Kansas that he had taken the truck from its owners. He said he had killed the owners. He said the owners were in the back of the truck. These statements were made casually, possibly while under the influence of drugs. The friends who heard these statements did not immediately report them to police. They may have thought Roger was exaggerating or joking. They may have been involved in illegal activities themselves and wanted no contact with law enforcement. One friend took Roger's statements seriously enough to visit the farm. He went to the property and looked around the outbuildings. He saw a freezer in one of the sheds. The friend put the pieces together, but said nothing to authorities at that time. But information was reaching law enforcement, and the person who would finally bring Roger's activities to the attention of authorities was someone who knew him well, someone who loved him but could not ignore what she was seeing. That person was Debbie Lynn Milam, another of Roger's aunts who lived in Russell County. Debbie Lynn Milam was Roger Gillette's aunt. She lived in Russell County and had known Roger since childhood. She loved her nephew, but she also knew his problems. Roger's involvement with methamphetamine was not new. His criminal behavior had escalated over the years. Debbie found herself caught between family loyalty and civic responsibility. On March 28, 2004, Debbie saw or heard something that alarmed her. The exact details of what triggered her decision remain unclear, but something made Debbie believe that Roger was actively manufacturing methamphetamine at the family farm. She knew the farm's location. She knew it stood abandoned. She knew it would be an ideal spot for a drug lab. Debbie also learned that Roger was driving a truck he claimed to have acquired in Mississippi. The white Dodge Dakota with Mississippi plates did not belong to anyone Debbie recognized. Roger's explanation for how he obtained the vehicle seemed suspicious. Debbie's instincts told her something was wrong. Debbie faced a difficult choice. Reporting Roger to police would be seen as betrayal by other family members, but allowing drug manufacturing to continue on family property put everyone at risk. If police raided the farm and found a meth lab, the property could be seized. Family members could face charges for allowing illegal activity on their land, even if they did not directly participate. On the morning of March 29, 2004, Debbie Lynn Milam went to the Russell County Sheriff's Department. She arrived at approximately 11:15 a.m. She told officers that Roger had manufactured methamphetamine at the Gillette farm the previous day. She provided the farm's address, 482 190th Street in rural Russell County. She said Roger had stolen a pickup truck, and the vehicle was currently on the farm property. The Sheriff's Department contacted the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Drug manufacturing cases often require specialized knowledge and resources. KBI agent Matthew Lyon was a narcotics investigator with more than 20 years of experience. He understood how meth labs operated. He knew what evidence to look for. He knew how to build cases that would result in prosecutions. Agent Leon interviewed Debbie Milam at the sheriff's office. She was not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. She appeared credible. She provided specific details about Roger's activities. She gave the exact location of the farm. She described the stolen truck as a white pickup with Mississippi plates. Debbie also told investigators where Roger was currently staying. He had been living with his aunt Patty Hewlett at 606 North Ash Street in Russell. This information gave investigators two locations to target: the farm where drug manufacturing allegedly occurred and the house where Roger was staying. Agent Leon knew he needed search warrants before entering either property. He could not simply show up and search based on Debbie's statements. He needed judicial authorization. He prepared affidavits explaining the information he had received from a credible informant. He described his experience investigating drug cases. He laid out probable cause for believing drug manufacturing was occurring at the specified locations. A Kansas judge reviewed Agent Leon's affidavits. The information met the legal standard for issuing search warrants. The judge signed two warrants, one authorizing search of 606 North Ash Street, where Roger was staying, and one authorizing search of the Gillette farm at 5482 190th Street. Agent Leon assembled his team. Multiple KBI officers would participate in executing both warrants simultaneously. This prevented Roger from being warned about one search location while officers were at the other. Both locations would be secured at the same time. The searches were scheduled for the afternoon of March 29th. Officers prepared their equipment and reviewed the warrant details. At 3:45 p.m. on March 29, 2004, KBI officers and local law enforcement began executing the search warrant at 606 North Ash Street. Agent Matthew Lyon led the operation. Officers surrounded the house to prevent anyone from fleeing. They knocked on the door and announced their presence. Roger Gillette and Lisa Jo Chamberlain were inside the residence. Officers found methamphetamine and drug paraphernalia in plain view. Both Roger and Lisa were arrested immediately on drug charges. The search was completed by 5:05 p.m. Roger and Lisa were transported to Russell County Jail in separate vehicles. At 5:13 p.m., Agent Lyon attempted to interview Lisa at the jail. He read her Miranda rights. Lisa stated clearly that she did not want to answer questions. The interview ended at 5:20 p.m. Lyon had asked only basic identifying questions. Lisa provided her name and birth date, but refused further conversation. While Lisa was being processed at the jail, other officers were executing the second search warrant at the Gillette farm. They arrived at the property at approximately 5:15 p.m. The farm consisted of several acres with multiple outbuildings. Officers began searching systematically. In the metal shed, officers found a white Dodge Dakota pickup truck with Mississippi license plates. They ran the registration. The truck was registered to Linda Marie Heinzelman of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Officers noted this information but continued searching the property. A stolen vehicle charge would be added to Roger's existing drug charges. Officers moved to the wooden granary. The building was old but structurally sound. It had electricity running to it, which was unusual for an abandoned farm building. Inside the granary, officers saw a large freezer. The freezer was bound shut with multiple layers of duct tape and electrical tape. The unit was plugged into an electrical outlet and running. The excessive tape immediately raised suspicion. People do not tape freezers shut unless they want to prevent someone from opening them. The tape was wrapped around the entire freezer multiple times. Someone had spent significant time securing this freezer. Officers knew they needed to see what was inside. An officer cut through the tape layers. He lifted the freezer lid. Inside were black plastic trash bags and what appeared to be body parts. Human body parts. The officer immediately recognized human remains. He closed the freezer and secured the scene. Officers requested a homicide search warrant. The original warrant authorized searching for drugs. Finding human bodies required additional judicial authorization before officers could remove the remains and continue investigating. The farm became a crime scene. Officers established a perimeter and prevented anyone from entering or leaving the property. Back at the Russell County Jail, Roger Gillette was being interviewed by Agent Lyon. Roger had been read his Miranda rights. He initially agreed to talk with officers. He told them he had recently hitchhiked back to Kansas from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where he had been staying with his relative Vernon Hewlett for 1 or 2 months. He said he had not been to the Gillette farm in months. Agent Lyon then told Roger that a white pickup truck with Mississippi tags had been reported stolen. Roger immediately stated that he needed to speak with an attorney. Lyon prepared to take Roger back to his cell. But as they walked, Lyon mentioned that there might be additional charges beyond the drug offenses. Roger asked what charges. His curiosity overcame his caution. Roger withdrew his request for an attorney. He wanted to know what else police had found. The interview continued. Roger provided more information, but he also incriminated himself further with each answer. Eventually, Roger again invoked his right to an attorney. The interview ended. Officers at the farm received authorization for the homicide search warrant. They returned to the freezer and removed the contents. Inside were the dismembered remains of 2 adults, 1 male and 1 female. The bodies had been cut into pieces and stored in plastic bags. The freezer's cooling mechanism had prevented extensive decomposition, but the remains showed signs of violence. Officers contacted Hattiesburg, Mississippi police. They explained that they had found human remains at a Kansas farm, a stolen vehicle registered to a Linda Heinzelman of Hattiesburg, and suspects who claimed connection to Vernon Hewlett of Hattiesburg. Hattiesburg police immediately responded. They sent officers to 908 South Gulfport Street to check on Vernon Hewlett and Linda Heinzelman. Hattiesburg officers entered the residence. They found evidence of violence immediately. Bloodstains covered multiple areas of the house. Carpeting had been removed from the floor, exposing bare surfaces beneath. A safe in the bedroom had been pried open. Personal belongings were scattered or missing. Vernon and Linda were gone. Hattiesburg Police Chief David Wynn would later tell media that the murders were gruesome. The level of violence inside the house exceeded what officers typically encountered. This was not a simple killing. This was rage acted out on 2 people in their own home. Lisa Jo Chamberlain spent the night of March 29, 2004, in a cell at Russell County Jail. She had refused to speak with investigators after her initial arrest on drug charges. But overnight, something changed in her thinking. Perhaps reality set in. Perhaps the methamphetamine cleared from her system enough for her to process what had happened. Perhaps she realized Roger would try to blame everything on her. On the morning of March 30th, Lisa sent a message through a jailer. She wanted to speak with KBI agents. She was ready to talk. Agent Lyon was contacted and returned to the jail to interview Lisa. Lisa waived her Miranda rights. She agreed to speak without an attorney present. Over the course of March 30th, KBI officers conducted 3 separate interviews with Lisa. She explained her relationship with Roger Gillette. She described how they met in Oregon. She detailed their move to Kansas and their involvement with methamphetamine manufacturing. Lisa told officers about the trip to Mississippi in late February. She explained that Roger wanted to stay with his cousin Vernon Hewlett in Hattiesburg. Lisa provided details about the tension that built after Linda Heinzelman failed to file an insurance claim as promised. She described Roger's increasing anger toward Linda. She explained that Vernon had asked them to move out of the house. She said Roger was enraged by this request. Then Lisa described the murders. She explained what Roger did to Vernon. She described the attack on Linda. She detailed the hours of violence that occurred inside the house on March 20th. She admitted her own presence during these events. She acknowledged that she did not stop Roger. She admitted she did not call police. Lisa told investigators about the dismemberment of the bodies. On March 31st, Lisa initiated another interview. She was not pressured to continue talking. She volunteered additional information. She offered to show investigators where evidence had been disposed of in Russell County. Lisa took officers to the Russell County landfill. She pointed out the location where she and Roger had dumped trash bags from the Hattiesburg house. Officers began searching that area of the landfill. They recovered 7 plastic trash bags containing evidence from the crime scene. Inside the bags, investigators found Vernon Hewlett's wallet and driver's license. They found his work shirt and work pants, both with his name printed on them. They found Linda Heinzelman's wallet, purse, and driver's license. They found a Hattiesburg phone book. They found a crocheted pillow heavily stained with blood. One bag contained a pair of New Balance tennis shoes with blood-like stains on them. These shoes would become critical evidence. Investigators from Kansas and Mississippi worked together to build their case against Roger Gillette and Lisa Jo Chamberlain. Vernon Hewlett's mother identified the freezer found at the Kansas farm as belonging to her son and Linda. Dr. Donald Podgman's autopsies documented the extreme violence both victims endured. Vernon died from blunt force head trauma caused by hammer blows. Linda suffered at least 69 separate injuries from stabbing, beating, and asphyxiation with plastic bags, plus sexual assault with a beer bottle. Forensic evidence strongly linked both defendants to the crimes. Roger's fingerprints appeared on the freezer exterior and on both sides of the duct tape sealing it shut. New Balance shoes found in a Kansas landfill matched bloody shoe prints at the Hattiesburg crime scene, and the blood tested positive for Linda's DNA. Neighbors confirmed seeing Roger and Lisa at the victim's house. Vernon's co-workers reported he stopped showing up for work on March 20th, which was completely out of character. 2 of Roger's Kansas friends told investigators Roger had casually admitted killing the truck's owners, with one friend even visiting the farm and seeing the suspicious freezer. Mississippi prosecutors charged both defendants with capital murder because the killings occurred during a robbery. They decided to try Lisa first. While in Forest County Jail awaiting trial, Lisa briefly shared a cell with Vanessa Stringfellow, who would testify that Lisa described having sex with Roger in front of Vernon's corpse and calling it the greatest sex ever, and an adrenaline rush. Lisa's defense faced overwhelming evidence, including her multiple detailed confessions to police. Defense attorneys argued she acted under Roger's domination due to her traumatic history, but prosecutors countered that she was a willing participant who had numerous opportunities to seek help. Judge Bob Helfrich ruled Lisa's confessions admissible and allowed the jailhouse informant testimony. Lisa's 3-day trial in August 2006 featured testimony from Vernon's mother, the pathologist, Kansas investigators, and crime lab technicians. The prosecution played audio recordings of Lisa's confessions. Defense attorneys focused on the penalty phase, presenting Dr. Beverly Smallwood, a court-appointed psychologist who spent over 20 hours evaluating Lisa. Dr. Smallwood testified about Lisa's childhood of constant abuse by her father, alcoholic mother, stepfather, half-brother, and even a 4th-grade teacher who raped her. She diagnosed Lisa with PTSD and borderline personality disorder, explaining Lisa started using drugs at ages 12 and 13 to cope with trauma. The psychologist described how Roger once tried to drown Lisa, and her response was to comfort him, showing how damaged her understanding of relationships had become. Dr. Smallwood summarized that Lisa was a psychological mess who lacked the tools, role models, or support system needed to make better choices. The jury deliberated on Lisa Jo Chamberlain's guilt. Despite the mitigation evidence about her traumatic childhood, the facts of the case were clear. Lisa had been present during the murders. She had helped Roger dispose of the bodies. She had participated in covering up the crimes. She had confessed to these actions multiple times. On August 4, 2006, the jury returned guilty verdicts on both counts of capital murder. Lisa showed little visible reaction to the verdicts. She had known this outcome was likely. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Her own confessions had sealed her fate. The same jury that convicted Lisa now had to decide her punishment. Under Mississippi law, capital murder carries only 2 possible sentences: death by lethal injection or life imprisonment without possibility of parole. There is no middle option in capital cases. Prosecutors argued that Lisa deserved death. They emphasized the brutality of the crimes. They highlighted Linda Heinzelman's prolonged suffering through hours of torture. They reminded the jury of the 69 separate injuries Linda sustained. They argued that executing Lisa was justice for Vernon and Linda. Defense attorneys argued for life imprisonment. They asked the jury to consider Lisa's traumatic childhood. They emphasized that she did not wield the weapons that killed Vernon and Linda. They argued that Roger was the driving force behind the murders. They suggested that Lisa's damaged psyche made her incapable of resisting Roger's influence. The jury deliberated on sentencing. They weighed the aggravating factors of the crimes against the mitigating factors of Lisa's background. Mississippi law requires juries to find that aggravating circumstances outweigh mitigating circumstances before imposing a death sentence. On the same day as her conviction, August 4, 2006, the jury recommended that Lisa Jo Chamberlain be sentenced to death. Judge Bob Helfrich accepted the jury's recommendation. He formally sentenced 33-year-old Lisa Jo Chamberlain to death by lethal injection on 2 counts of capital murder. Lisa was transported from Forest County Jail to the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility in Pearl, Rankin County. This facility houses Mississippi's female death row inmates. Lisa became one of only 2 women on Mississippi's death row at that time. The other woman was Michelle Byram, who would later have her conviction overturned and be released. Lisa's execution date was not immediately set. In Mississippi, death penalty cases undergo automatic direct appeal to the Mississippi Supreme Court. No execution can occur until all appeals are exhausted. The appeals process typically takes many years. Roger Gillette's trial began in October 2007, more than a year after Lisa's conviction. Roger's trial lasted 4 days. Prosecutors presented essentially the same evidence they had used in Lisa's trial. The crimes were identical. The physical evidence was the same. The witness testimony covered the same facts. Roger's defense team called 8 witnesses during the sentencing phase. These witnesses spoke about Roger's moral character. A priest testified that Roger wanted to be baptized in prison and that he had developed genuine faith. Roger's mother provided tearful testimony. She showed the jury pictures of Roger as a baby. She described him as her son, who she still loved despite his crimes. The jury found Roger guilty on both counts of capital murder on November 2, 2007. The next day, November 3, 2007, Judge Bob Helfrich sentenced Roger to death by lethal injection. Roger was transported to Unit 29 at Mississippi State Penitentiary, known as Parchman, where male death row inmates are housed. Both Lisa and Roger were now on death row. Both faced execution for the murders of Vernon Hewlett and Linda Heinzelman. Both began the lengthy appeals process that characterizes death penalty cases, but their paths through the legal system would diverge in unexpected ways. Lisa's automatic appeal to the Mississippi Supreme Court was filed in late 2006. Her attorneys raised multiple issues. They challenged the admission of her confessions. They argued ineffective assistance of counsel. Lisa's appeals were rejected at every step. The Mississippi Supreme Court said no in 2008 and again in 2010. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear her case in 2011. The courts noted that Lisa had admitted to the crimes many times and never said Roger forced her to do anything. Roger's appeals also failed at first, but in 2014 he got a break. The Mississippi Supreme Court canceled his death sentences because prosecutors had wrongly used his trip to Kansas against him during sentencing. He was still guilty of murder, but he would get a new sentencing hearing. Now Lisa was still facing death while Roger was not, even though they committed the same crimes together. Lisa's lawyers argued that the prosecutors removed black people from the jury because of their race. In 2015, a federal judge agreed and ordered a new trial. The issue was that prosecutors kicked out 2 black men named Thomas Sturgis and David Minor from the jury, but kept a white man named Brannon Cooper, who gave the exact same answers about the death penalty. In 2017, 3 appeals judges agreed this was wrong. But in 2018, more judges looked at the case and said the prosecutors had good reasons. The Supreme Court refused to look at it in 2019, so Lisa went back to death row. Lisa Jo Chamberlain has been on death row since August 4, 2006. She has spent more than 19 years awaiting execution. She is currently 52 years old. The woman who entered death row at age 33 has aged into middle age while confined at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. Lisa is Mississippi's only woman on death row. Michelle Byram, the only other woman on Mississippi's death row during Lisa's time there, had her conviction overturned in 2014. Byram was released in 2015 and died in 2019. Lisa has been the sole female death row inmate in Mississippi for over 10 years. If Lisa is executed, she will be the first woman put to death in Mississippi since May 19, 1944, when Mildred Johnson was executed in a portable electric chair. 81 years separate these two women. Mississippi has executed 25 people since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. None of those 25 were women. Lisa's living conditions at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility are restrictive. Death row inmates in Mississippi live under maximum security. Their movement is limited. Their contact with other inmates is minimal. Their activities are controlled. Lisa has written about her experience on death row. In correspondence shared publicly by anti-death penalty organizations, Lisa described the isolation. The worst part for myself about being on death row is not being able to choose anything about my own life. Yes, I choose how I respond, what I read, or if I want a tray or not. But what about classes? What about doing all I can to become a functioning inmate? This is the loneliest place I have ever been. Lisa expressed desire to connect with other women in her situation. She noted that as Mississippi's only female death row inmate, she has no peers who understand her specific circumstances. She wanted to write a newsletter for women on death row, but had no audience in Mississippi because she is the only one. Lisa also wrote about positive changes in her thinking during her years of incarceration. I have learned how to be grateful for small things, how to respect those in authority. I have a relationship with God and am learning to depend on Him instead of the world. I realize how important life is and why it is important. I have been able to work through much of my brokenness and see my greatness through God's view, not humans. Lisa acknowledged that arriving at this perspective required extreme circumstances. I have become the woman God called me to be, and this situation is what it has taken. The only change I would make is that lives didn't have to be lost. Lisa has 3 adult children from her 3 marriages. She has at least 1 granddaughter. She expressed longing to hug her child and granddaughter. She mentioned the burden of needing to ask for money rather than earning it herself. She described wanting phone contact with family but being unable to afford it. Lisa seeks pen pals through anti-death penalty organizations. She wants connection with the outside world. She wants people to see her as more than the worst things she did. She wants to be understood as a complete person with a complicated history rather than simply as a monster. Roger Gillette is serving his life sentences at Marshall County Correctional Facility. He was transferred there on March 29, 2024, exactly 20 years after his arrest. His conditions are less restrictive than death row, but still involve long-term incarceration. Roger is currently 50 years old. He will die in prison. As of November 2025, Mississippi has 36 to 37 people on death row. All are in various stages of appeals through state or federal courts. The average age of Mississippi death row inmates is 48.8 years. The average time spent on death row is 20.1 years. The oldest inmate is Richard Jordan, age 76, who has been on death row for 45 years. Mississippi has no executions currently scheduled. The state has not executed anyone since David Cox in November 2012. The 13-year gap in executions reflects both legal challenges to lethal injection protocols and the lengthy appeals process in capital cases. Lisa will be executed by lethal injection, but no execution date has been set yet. She remains on death row at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, waiting while her lawyers continue to fight for her life through additional legal challenges. Will they succeed in saving her from execution? Only time will tell. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries. Don't forget to like this video and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new cases. Your support helps us bring you more detailed investigations into the darkest corners of the criminal justice system.